For those of you who haven't had the pleasure of meeting me yet, I'm Kirsten Openshaw, your host here at the One You podcast. And occasionally, my husband, Clive Openshaw, who those of you who don't already know us, he is my imported husband from the UK. He will occasionally join me on the podcast too. So let's dive into a little bit about me and why you might want to listen to this podcast with me. So I've been in the real estate space for almost a decade now. I came to Texas in 2006 and I knew one person in the entire state, basically the entire country. I grew up in the Middle East, so I had a few international friends that were kind of scattered and sprinkled across the US, across the country, but I didn't know exactly where they were. I blame my ADHD in geography class and the lack of the focus that I saw on the States back in my Middle Eastern school for that. But I call this my trial period. And kind of like our option periods in real estate, I had a non-refundable deposit to this roller coaster ride of living on my own in Texas. Now, this was all thanks to my fortune being told by a random gypsy traveler lady in our English farmhouse way back in 2006. Yes, that is literally how I picked Texas, a place that I had zero geographic understanding of at all. So she told me I was going to meet a cowboy in Texas. So who was I to question that, right? I bought a ticket, I got a visa approved, and I jumped on a plane. Now I know that's a little extreme, but I also know there are some other crazies like me that will be listening and nodding and saying, yep, I would do that because life is full of opportunities, right? If we choose to take the leap and we choose to jump on those. So I landed in Texas with one suitcase, no phone. And this was before Facebook or any of the social media platforms were huge. So I had no easy way to contact anybody. I hadn't even told my friends that I was going on this trip. And bam, a few months later, I'm married to a cowboy. So ta-da, I did exactly what the gypsy told me. So now what, right? Well, 5 years into that extended option period and fighting with immigration, I finally get my green card. My cowboy and I realize we don't even really like each other all that much, and we get our fancy divorce decree. Thankfully, it was pretty amicably, and I take some time to basically figure out where my next gypsy fortune telling is coming from. And at that point, I had decided to do this via getting advance parole from the USCIS. So anybody who's listening to this that is a fellow transplantee, you will know basically that is an authorization from the U.S. Immigration Service for a green card holder to allow you to leave the U.S. for a longer period of time. And you're allowed to then do that without losing or jeopardizing your green card status. Now, during my advance parole, I found myself out on an evening out, reconnecting with one of my childhood friends. We had a bit of a reunion party. This was in the small town of Tewkesbury, where I grew up in Gloucestershire. And bam, I literally walk into Clive. So long story short, I snagged him. We had met in high school, so we kind of knew each other a little bit. But way back then, we did not get along. We had very different perceptions of the world and life. And so super long story short, we started our relationship. I imported him to the US because the year I spent on my advance parole in England was the wettest year in 70 years. After you've lived in Texas for 5 years with zero rain, that was a little bit of a culture shock for me and not my favorite of shocks. So I imported him to the US. The fight with immigration started, and let me tell you, they did not like that I was importing a ginger British dude with a little bit of swagger in his walk. Those of you that know him, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And those of you that have yet to meet him, and you'll meet him at some of our events or trainings, you will soon see. He also knows how to build great quality custom homes, but that didn't really impress them, and they really didn't like this plan of ours at all. So we ultimately had to do a long distance relationship for 4 years. That is a mile difference. It's not a car ride. You can't road trip it. It's international flights. It's international travel. It's visas. It's the whole 9 yards, plus a 6-hour time difference. So that on its own is enough of a hurdle that most relationships would not have survived. Most relationships would have exploded and failed because of this. So as you can imagine, this was a pretty big problem for us, but we were determined to make this work. Now, let me tell you something. A long distance relationship will teach you all about communication, all about structure, all about balancing your time zones and still living a life where your feet are, negotiations, time management for trips to see each other, and also really not to go financially broke during this process, because international travel multiple times a year can get pretty expensive. So 4 years is a pretty long time. That's like almost 1,500 days. Now, what does this mean for you listening? Because likely you're a business owner or a real estate agent and you're thinking, okay, great. Well, I'm not in a long distance relationship. So how is this relevant to me and having a hugely successful business right now? Well, this time in our lives taught us so much that I am now able to share this with you after all of the success that it essentially created for me in my business. And just to make sure that we're really, really testing ourselves during this time, we were also working on starting our family in that time period too. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking, okay, great, well, this isn't relevant to me. I don't have a long distance relationship, but we are starting a family, everything's going the way we want, but we also want to add in this successful business. How do we do this and balance everything? What I'm about to share with you, this I feel like is going to help you see how these dots connect. Because as we were also starting to work on starting our family, because time doesn't stop for your biological clock and the human nature's desire for babies and making your family, during that 4-year period, we actually did 2 failed IVF attempts in the UK. That's where I would go and I would stay in the UK and England for an extended period of time. And, they do all the meds, like they do several weeks of medication preparation before you start the transfer where they transfer the embryo to try and basically get you pregnant. So we were bunking in Clive's parents' house because at this point, we didn't know we were going to have such a long immigration fight. So he had gone ahead and sold his home there, and we had already bought a house in Texas because we thought he would just be allowed to come over. That's what we were advised with the attorney and everything else, and that's not how this went. So it was fine. We roll with it, right? So we're bunking in Clive's parents' house because my parents were actually going to charge me rent, and it wasn't cheap rent, to stay, get this, in a tent in the barn. Now, this is not a barn like in Texas where it's not freezing cold. This is a concrete, cold, damp, wet barn. So yes, that is another story for another time. I'm sure that will come up during the podcast, where we will dig into the mindset of that, the framework that we had around that, and so on. It was just another hurdle and another opportunity to check where we really wanted to focus our futures on. So fast forward 4 very long years, when Clive finally got his green card, he flew over here in 2016. I then had this epiphany that we should just sell our house, the one that he had bought back when he sold his house in the UK. And that was, again, before we knew it was going to take this long. I had this epiphany that we should sell this house that he had yet to live in. He had never gone to live in this house. And I assured him, this sleepy town, it's going to take 6 months, probably longer, to sell this house. We've got plenty of time. Well, you know how the universe loves to mess with your plans and all. So the universe laughed at our plan, and the house sold in under a month. So this was all thanks to him being a wonderful showing agent, because buyers were actually just being sent to our house unattended. They were given the combination codes to access our house alone. And this was all unbeknownst to us. We didn't know that this was the plan. We had no expectations set at this time. And basically all of this pushed me even more into wanting to get into real estate, because at this point I had already had 2 awful experiences. I'd have an awful purchase experience with, back with my option period cowboy marriage, and then a horrific short sale experience when that marriage didn't go to plan. And at that point, it was really clear that the agent that my ex-husband had chosen to hire and use during the sale, I don't even know, I believe it was the same agent that we had used when we purchased the house. I was living in the UK at this time. This agent clearly had absolutely no idea what she was doing. And looking back, I can see many errors in our sale that illustrates her lack of experience and her lack of confidence at that time. And this left me with a huge deficit on my credit and a very, very crappy credit score, which if you live in the US and you're listening to this, that is a game we have to play in order to have any kind of leverage on any kind of financing, even to get your electricity bill, right? So it's crazy how important this game of credit scores is. But I had a problem. I knew nobody in the new town that we were moving to. Nobody is a pretty big obstacle in a sphere of influence industry. This entire real estate industry is based on relationships, and I had 0 relationships. We also, just to add some spice to the pot, could not find a house to buy. So we ended up staying in a toy hauler fifth wheel on a lady's property that I had met on a trail ride. So you can see the theme here. Things just kind of happen. I'm sure that you've had this happen in your life too, where things just happen. Relationships just start. People just come in and out, kind of like a revolving door for the chapters that are relevant. They come in and out of your life, and oftentimes it's for a reason that we don't really know at that time. So I had met this lady on a trail ride, and she was kind enough to let us crash with our dogs and our cats and our horses and all of our stuff until we found a home the one that we're in now, the one that we bought now. And in true fashion, the home that we bought was a huge project. It's a 1947 build that needed a total gut job. It was a hoarder situation that had pretty much been kept totally original the entire life of this home. So while we lived in it, we were doing the remodel because we had just blown through every penny that we ever had with immigration costs. You know, all that long distance travel, all the immigration forms, the attorney fees, everything, including just moving ourselves, selling up, moving, paying for storage. All of these things had completely obliterated our finances, and the icing on the cake was that I actually got fired from my first ever job. And the reason I got fired, just side note, my ADHD kicking in, was I challenged my boss over a little bit of a desperate choice he had made for a quick buck, for some quick income, that ultimately resulted in a sweet lady's back being broken in a truly horrific horse accident with a psychotic horse. It's another story for another time that I'm sure I'll bring up during the podcast. But that on its own, it resulted in me being fired for the first time, which was traumatic. It was a huge shock to my confidence, my belief in myself, and it was yet another opportunity to check our life's trajectory. So here we are, 16, living in a literal construction site. And some of you listening might not have ever been living in a situation like this, but you might be using, I have a really cluttered office, or, there's the excuse of there's dishes in the sink or whatever it is. I'm here to tell you that if I can build a multi-6-figure real estate business in this utter chaos where I launched exactly that, then you can do it with laundry that needs to be done, or the yard needs to be mowed, or maybe your toddler has the flu. Whatever it is, whatever that might be for you. Now, I don't say that to make light of any of your situations, because everybody's life is different. I say it so that you can choose to feel confident that success is possible for you too. And if you've listened this far, then based on that alone, you already know we took on more just to check that we were busy enough in our true fashion, right? So we chose to do yet another IVF cycle in Dallas, Texas, which is about 90 minutes drive from our house, which for those of you who are already blowing and going in the real estate world, or already blowing and going in your self-employed business, it's hard to take several hours out of your day to do personal doctor's appointments. Plus times that by 3, sometimes 4 times a week. It was a struggle, not just in the time management, but also the emotional capacity, right? Your bandwidth. We all have a limited amount of bandwidth that we can focus and concentrate on. So this was taking a toll in that way. It was a struggle to manage the time, to launch the business, to handle contracts, to juggle new clients, especially when I myself was still learning the ropes. This was just a few months into me starting my real estate career. Forward a little bit, our third IVF cycle worked, and we had our oldest son, Lincoln, in early 2018. And unfortunately, he was born with a congenital heart defect. So his heart defect is called hypoplastic right heart syndrome, which basically means he was born with half a heart. And also means that he lived in the hospital for several months. Anybody that's ever spent time in the hospital, you know how exhausting that can be. And you're just not sleeping in your own bed. You have no routine. There is no, 8 hours sleep, even if your child is doing good. You've got nurses coming in and doing vitals and checks that they must do while your child's in the hospital. But those in and out, sometimes they just turn all the lights on, everything's beeping, they're talking, because for them, this is their daytime shift, right? It's just 3 a.m. for me. So our story with Lincoln is an ongoing one, during which, I did build this very successful real estate business. And without this business, I do want to highlight for any of you that are also in that fertility struggle or just some kind of financial struggle, without the business that I have built, neither of our children would exist. I know without a doubt, neither of our children would exist, because both of our children are IVF miracles and successes. Both of our children, just to create them, was $50,000. So there's $100,000 that I would not have made working my 12-hour-a-day job at the barn training horses, which was the job I got fired from, where I was earning maybe $35,000 a year, okay, before taxes. My children would never have existed. IVF is not covered on insurance, so it's a side tangent just to give you hope that if you're in a situation right now where you're struggling and you need a chunk of money, real estate is an amazing way to get that. And since then, I've helped hundreds of clients close on homes, hundreds. And what we've built means that Clive was able to actually join me in the business full time when COVID hit, as obviously with a medically fragile child, nobody knew the truth about COVID at the time. The media was doing its sensationalism. We didn't know what was true. We didn't know up from down. And his job at the time had him entering many homes a day. He was working in the fix and flip industry. He was a project manager. So he was going into a lot of homes before they were vacant. And so they were homes that were in a lot of disrepair. They're not necessarily the cleanest. And then he was also walking through finished homes where there was a lot of contractors, and contractors don't call in sick. They're paid by the day. They can't afford to call in sick. So he was around a lot of different types of people, some sick, some not, and so on. Ultimately, we just couldn't risk exposure or any illness to come into our family and affect Lincoln, because at that time he obviously had his heart condition, which there is no cure, and he also at that time had pulmonary hypertension, which is an issue with his lungs. So COVID being an upper respiratory virus, we could not risk him having exposure with that. So when Lincoln finally made it home with us from the hospital, we could not risk him having to go back. Lincoln was home. Clive actually was able to come home from his job, and we had replaced his income via the real estate business. So, when Lincoln finally made it home with us, plus Clive's family being away, and, it was just a lot of stress on us that we needed him home, and we needed to know that we weren't going to take any unnecessary risk to go back to the hospital. So add in the fact that Clive's family are all incredibly hard workers. They've also always been self-employed. His dad owns his own custom construction, home building construction company in the UK, which that created that typical dad out at work all day environment. And it means that Clive didn't really have as much time as he wanted with his dad. So very early on in our relationship, we had decided that we wanted a very different home life where he stayed home with our kids so that they had a close relationship. And then, of course, fast forward over the next few years, we found ourselves balancing kids. We found ourselves balancing the pandemic, being self-employed for the first time ever for both of us, so having no set income. And of course, then add in the NAR lawsuit, of course, that was kicking things up a notch, and it was seemingly threatening all of our livelihoods. COVID shut us down. Were we essential? Were we not essential? All of this was happening while we had zero help. We had no team. We had no staff. We were doing this without any trusted childcare. When you have a medically fragile child, you can't just drop them in daycare. Lincoln is not accepted into many daycares because he does not eat by mouth. So we had added hurdles and obstacles where we couldn't just hire a babysitter because he was on tube feeds every 90 minutes. Nursing and things like that didn't come into our life until later. So it was a lot. So for any of you listening that might be thinking to yourself, yeah, that's great, but I have, a Velcro kid. I can't even go to the restroom without them joining me. I am here to tell you that Lincoln spent most days hugging my legs under my desk while I spent hours upon hours cold calling, circle prospecting, calling for sale by owners, calling expireds, calling online leads, running ads, literally trying everything that everyone else told me would work. I dove headfirst into every situation, which now means you may not have to do that because every little thing that you're suggested is not going to work for you. These proven methods that coaches and gurus tell you, 70% of it is luck and circumstance of why it worked for that particular person. They may not be upfront with you about that, but I'm here to tell you 70% of it is essentially luck and circumstance and just being at the right place at the right time. You could do everything exactly the same as them and still not have that same result. So you don't have to do every single thing that I share with you, but you can also use this podcast to choose some of the things selectively to not fall into doing that may not work for you. Because having no support and no village, it's super hard. And, I agree, it's not the way things used to be. However, it's what we have right now. And you can choose to sit in that victim mindset of, woe is me. You can choose to buy into those excuses and challenges, which when you buy into those, you get to keep them. If you want to fight for your excuses, you're going to get to keep them. Or you can lean in right here, right now, and you can choose to reframe it. And you can choose to look for and find your unique path on your success story. So let's dig in a little bit more to my real estate journey so you can see exactly how I got to where I am today and why you should listen to this podcast to help you achieve and find your own way to do the same thing for you. So along this real estate journey, I was introduced to influential coaches, business owners, and top producers. Now, if you're already in the real estate world or the self-employed world, you already know that the gurus and whatnot, they can pop up at any time. And as long as they've got ad spend and ad budget, they can try and buy your trust. My goal with sharing my story through this podcast is to help you see through that forest of sales pitches and be confident in your decisions on where you seek help and training. So long before I started real estate, I'd always had a love for psychology and mindset-focused learning. And once I was introduced to more influential coaches and leaders in this industry, it became more and more apparent that that's exactly where their focus lied too. And from there, I put myself on a really strict diet of inspiration, mindset-focused education, sales training, and thus I achieved more invitations into more rooms that I had never even dreamt of being able to get into. But it wasn't until I met two people, Brandon Mulrennan and Chatty Bazzi, that everything started to turn around for me. These were two people who brought my attention to something called NLP. Now, Brandon was teaching very specific scripts. They worked to a point, but I couldn't understand why they worked, and I couldn't understand what parts were the magic and what made that magic disappear when I made the scripts my own. And this was a huge puzzle piece that I found myself missing. And any of you fellow ADHDers know that if there's a part missing, it's really hard to move past that. My brain fixates on things like that. And so for me, it was extremely hard to just keep parroting scripts without knowing why they worked, right? I like to know the mechanism so I can truly make it my own. I'm a very literal person. So when they say, take these scripts on and learn them and know them off by heart, and then you can turn around and customize them, I didn't know how to customize them because I didn't know which were the key ingredients to these scripts that I couldn't mess with, right? Which parts do they need to keep? Which parts of the cake, if I was throwing all these ingredients in a pot, which parts of the cake was I allowed to change, like the flavoring or the icing, without screwing up and pulling it out of the oven and it's just a gooey mess, right? So I found myself missing in that program this huge puzzle piece, and that's where Chatty Bazzi came in. And I learned the fundamentals of NLP with him. Now, NLP stands for neuro-linguistic programming. And what that is how you use the words to affect people's brains, how you get them to do stuff. So you already know if you're in sales or you've been around any sales or you've gone onto a car dealership or anything like that, you already know that all sales is just using words to affect people's brains to get them to do stuff they already said they wanted to do. Okay, so like we're not talking like shady stuff, right? And NLP, just so you have some history on it, NLP was originally designed as a quick fix therapy. So it was actually designed to take someone who was afraid of snakes or maybe spiders, and in about 5 minutes they would be able to put a tarantula in their hand and they would not be terrified. That gives me goosebumps, okay? So like someone's going to have to really NLP me to be okay with that. But I digress. So that would be really effective, I'm sure, for those of you who are already in real estate, already in sales. If you were talking to a for sale by owner, for example, to be able to help them get through their fear of you as a predatory salesperson, because that's how they almost instantaneously see you when they know you're a realtor. When you call and say, I have a fake buyer, they feel that, okay? Their alarm bells goes off, their survival brain kicks in. So when you're able to use these methods and this NLP language, so that almost instantaneously, they're feeling at ease with you. They feel comfortable with you, and that automatically builds trust with you. And if you've ever done any kind of training in sales, you know that once people know, like, and trust you, you have the sale. Now, I had always had an interest in NLP for over a decade. It had been on my mind, that I want to learn this. Now, that's the same list that like my ASL and my guitar learning and piano learning, they're all sitting on that same list, right? We all have that list. Or I think we do. So when this particular door opened for me, after many, many failed coaching relationships that were all skill-based, I might add, I studied night and day. I was absolutely obsessed with this material. And what I saw was it gave me the possibility of being able to generate an in-the-moment conversation without relying on the person that I was talking to, without relying on them to stick to an invisible script that they didn't even know existed. Right? Realtors, you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. In fact, anyone in sales will get it, right? People don't know they're supposed to say certain things so that you can say your next memorized line. But most coaches don't want to make themselves redundant by teaching you how. They just want to teach you the scripts so that you can copy them and you can parrot them. And it's always leaving you needing to come back for any time the market changes, anytime there's a lawsuit, for example, like the recent NAR lawsuit. I was learning how to have powerful, inspirational conversations that actually moved people forward. Now, in sales, that is a huge deal. I literally got to a place where I could call a for sale by owner or an expired homeowner. That means they had a listing on the market that failed to sell, in case you're listening to this and not in the real estate world. And I could have a normal conversation with them without fretting about, well, what if they say this? Or what if they object to that? I was able to have real conversations with real people without any anxiety and set more appointments than I could physically go on. I mean, wouldn't that be a cool place to be? Like, some of you listening might be thinking, well, yeah, that's great, but I don't have leads to call, or I'm not converting the conversations I am having, or I don't have any appointments and to even try and get signed clients. I am here to tell you, just take a breath. That is all going to change, because the longer you stick with me, the better your results are going to get. I mean, can you imagine being that effective in your sales business? But remember, okay, this is not a quick fix. That took work. It took study time. It took energy. It took concentration. Because NLP is about changing your entire language. NLP is about coming from a new ideology, a new way of thinking, a new philosophy. And you've probably experienced this too. I've been born into a family that absolutely did not use language in constructive ways or from a place of awareness. I'm sure anybody listening can relate to that. It is super hard to change those inherited thought patterns and limiting beliefs that we are culturally brought up around and have embedded into us from such a young age that we had no chance to protect ourselves. It took years and another phenomenal meeting with a coach that tied it all together for me, that helped me realize how this all tied together for me, for my relationships, for my health, and also for my wealth via my sales business. So as you're listening, you are becoming more and more aware that this can be a reality for you too. So stick around, dial in, and don't miss out or stay in struggle for a moment longer than you absolutely have to, okay? Once I felt like I had a handle on my NLP skills and my conversion rates were going through the roof, that is when I noticed I was still missing a fundamental piece of the puzzle of what made people tick. This was another thing that I had been long obsessed with, and in my overwhelming life where I had not slowed down enough yet to figure this out. I mean, any of you high D, go-getter style personalities listening may understand that. And if you're on the opposite side of the personality spectrum, you've probably seen someone like me going 100 miles an hour, never slowing down enough to review where they're at and why they're there and what things they could maybe make more efficient. So I say all that to say that all of that changed when I did another NLP training with a coach that is absolutely phenomenal. His name is Matthew Ferry. He is part of the Ferry family over in California, and his NLP course itself was just fantastic. I loved it. I learned even more, and I cemented in my skills into my brain at another level. Like, everything was phenomenal. But the big aha moment, that was a bonus training from him that connected the dots of mindset. What makes people tick? And how I could embed that into my life, my family, and my business. Now, let me set the scene here. I had always felt like a bit of an outcast, right? Like, I questioned things too much. I didn't think about things the right way, and I felt like I was made to be wrong just for asking those questions and thinking differently. Once I connected these dots, I began recognizing that meeting people exactly where they're at, including myself, was the ultimate form of acceptance. And not only that, it was also a fundamental part of unlocking that next level to connecting with people in a way that was unparalleled to any sales tactic or skills-based skill that I had learned. My goal for you within this podcast is to take you from that overwhelmed place of stress and feeling like you're getting hit with obstacle after obstacle and finding yourself probably wondering, like, when will this end? When will I get a breakthrough? To the place that I am at now and that I am at today, where you can connect with anyone you meet just like me if you choose to do this. So imagine yourself where you can be extremely selective about your clients, where you will find yourself signing clients because you want to, not because you have to, or it's in hopes of a maybe paycheck because you need the paycheck because the mortgage is coming up and nobody else is buying or selling right now, whatever it might be. I am going to take you from that place of feeling bombarded and all the options are just hitting you and it's obstacle after obstacle and things you feel like you have this needs to do and you have this FOMO, this fear of missing out, whether that's doing open houses or door knocking or doing mailers or doing cold calling or doing drop-bys, whatever it might be, to a place of peace where your clients and SOI are calling you because they feel like you're their best option. They know you, they like you, they trust you without you having to just discount your fees or buy their attention or chase them, which leaves everyone feeling pretty gross, doesn't it? So my business today is one based on inbound business, where I'm not chasing, I'm not targeting, I am simply here to help people. When I reach out and connect with someone, it's genuine and they feel that. I feel it too. And from there, those conversations are happening in easy conversations. I'm essentially out here having fun and I'm making friends with new people and I'm helping people see things differently. I'm game planning with them and I'm strategizing with them, basically in a big dream building exercise that results in me selling their homes and ultimately getting paid, almost like a byproduct. And relationships like that leads to lots of further inbound business via what we call referrals, which isn't that the main goal, to enjoy every day and have money come in almost as an afterthought? If that's what you want for your business and your days and your relationships too, then you have absolutely found the right place. Here at the One You podcast, that is our goal for you. And I do truly hope that you stick around for our future episodes where we can dig into common obstacles, common fears and challenges. And then together we can game plan ways for you to overcome them. We can learn from them. And then the most importantly really is to grow from them while increasing and enjoying your life. And of course, increasing the income that you get from that too. If you simply cannot wait to dig in more, then I would highly recommend getting a copy of my book, The Magnetic Advantage, so you can start getting a deeper understanding into what you will learn on this podcast. As always, don't just stumble into your story. Remember, you create yourself. You create your experience in this life. So start today with one choice, make one step, and become the one you that you want to be in your own story. You already have what it takes. So now let yourself live like you know that. I'm simply helping you grab the pen to write your story starting right now. So I will see you next time.